Hey, friends, welcome back to another episode of A Modern Nonprofit Podcast. My name is Tosha Anderson, and I'm your host today. I'm here with my friend Bill Woolsey. Bill, you are the founder. I love talking to fellow founders because I'm a founder as well.
Crazy people, crazy people.
Yeah, we have to be. It is not for the weak. That is certainly true. And I also love that because we talk with a lot of founders of nonprofit organizations. So I feel like founder to founder and other founders, we can all relate, although we're in different missions, but we certainly feel the entrepreneur pain or the emotional roller coaster as it is. But you are the founder of FiveTwo Network. This is a network that equips faith-based entrepreneurs. We have a lot of organizations that are rooted in faith. I think most of us that are called to do something in the nonprofit space sometimes are prompted by our faith. So you specifically work with faith-based entrepreneurs to launch a variety of different startups, right? And these could be all different sorts of types, and we'll hear a little bit more about that later on. But I know you've worked with homeless shelters, clinics, churches, sports ministries that I think we can all benefit from this conversation, whether you are rooted in faith or otherwise. They all have similar challenges. But Bill, I've noticed sometimes the faith-based organizations have a little bit different challenges than the average, but we'll talk a little bit more about that later. Bill, should we just go ahead and dive into some kind of burning questions that whenever I came across your profile, I thought these are some interesting points of conversation that we can have. And I think so you not only work with nonprofits, you also work for-profit organizations too, right? That are, and this is an interesting thing. I think a lot of people just assume if you're going to do good work in the community, you must create a nonprofit. And it's funny, I only work with nonprofit organizations, but sometimes I tell people, why on earth do you want to start a nonprofit, right? Or people ask me, Tasha, are you a nonprofit? I said, are you crazy? Absolutely not. There's so much more work that goes into running a nonprofit, I think, than people realize. But there are for-profit organizations that might be doing services within the community that could benefit from kind of donated income, or individuals that aren't necessarily buying a widget, or they're not necessarily engaging for services, but maybe they want to sponsor, pay for, or support some sort of initiative that maybe technically a for-profit organization is out to do. Tell us a little bit more about that. Is that a reality? Can that happen? Can people operate as a for-profit and still take on some of these initiatives? And if that's true, then how do they get that set up?
Yeah, so sure they can. You see this a lot, especially in a number of your social media organizations, or I should say organizations, companies that are very prevalent on social media, in part because your younger generations, millennial down to alpha, are very cause driven. They're huge cause driven. They want to see a cause impact. And so when you see these for-profit companies understanding that, and obviously it can be abused, it can be manipulated, it could be used just to make more sales, which I would say shame on you, but usually they understand the importance of being true to your cause. My wife, for instance, she uses cosmetics, CAUSE. So it's a cosmetic. That's a cosmetic. And so they understand that when they do that, they're making a difference. They're appealing to a slice of the population or a particular buyer. And if it's in line with their values, so that there's not this dichotomy or this juxtaposition of who they are and what they're trying to do, it's a wonderful kind of synergy that happens, because now all of a sudden, again, there's tax write-offs, right? There's actually tax benefits that they could be creating foundations or helping a particular people group. So for a for-profit, I would say, make sure you understand what's your cause. As a founder, you're always going to have a cause of some degree or another. Hopefully it's not just making money. And then how that can move into, if you're a for-profit, how that could be generated. And then you set up a 501c3 of some type. In some states, you might be setting up a different kind of entity. Arizona has a different nonprofit structure there. So you'd have to just go to your state level and check that out.
Absolutely. And of course, always talk with your, personal tax advisor on setting up some of those things, because you're right. There are several different strategies that you might decide there's a trigger point in which we want to create a more formal entity structure, like you mentioned, a foundation or an actual 501c3 public charity, that's how most nonprofits are formed, if that makes sense. And maybe it will for you. So kind of
or you may actually partner with a charity that's really aligned with your cause, and you may then have a seat on that board. I mean, there are lots of different ways you could do it. The important thing is that it aligns. So.
Yeah, you bring up a good point. I was actually talking to an entrepreneur the other day, and he has no interest in running a nonprofit in any shape or form. But I think what you're kind of describing, Bill, is a fiscal sponsorship, right? So you collect the money, or in this particular case, it was an association, and members of the association are creating a pool of funds for more charitable giving, not necessarily, hey, we're paying this membership to be part of this association. Like, hey, let's all throw in $100 and we will support building projects for Habitat for Humanity, or if I'm making something up, right? So they pool these resources together, and they actually engage kind of a fiscal sponsor, which is technically a nonprofit. You essentially funnel your money through. So there's lots of creative ways that you can operate as a for-profit, do good, collect resources and get them to the communities that you're looking for without necessarily just creating a nonprofit yourself. So I love that.
And what you're doing there too, your customer is quote unquote buying into your entity on different streams, different levels. So you're actually creating a stronger client/customer relationship.
Gotcha. Good point. So on the flip side of that, I have noticed, because of course I kind of peek behind the curtain with a lot of nonprofit organizations, we see more organizations, nonprofits, in their strategic plan, in just kind of their day-to-day operations, looking at ways to become less dependent on just general donations from the public and focusing more on what we call earned income. So kind of flipping the script a little bit. You had a for-profit looking for maybe donations or contributions from their customer base. Now we're talking about a nonprofit that wants to earn revenue in the same way that a for-profit would, either selling widgets, delivering services, those sort of things. I've noticed this too, Bill. I don't know if you've seen it. More organizations, like I said, are trying to diversify their revenue streams by way of earning it through a more reliable kind of source, right? What do you think some of the challenges are when these nonprofits decide, let's think creatively about how we can control the flow of money more or differently than maybe what we've been doing in the past through earned income? What are the challenges that you've seen in your space?
Well, it's just you're always going to have challenges. So in our process of helping you launch successfully, we want you to have both earned income and donative income streams, especially if you're a nonprofit. Because again, the diversity, but more than that, it communicates a hands up, not a hands out. And so you're helping your client actually grow in accountability, responsibility, and in generating contributions themselves to society. So when you have an earned income stream, your key challenge is to make sure it aligns somehow, some way with accomplishing your mission and what your cause is. And the closer, again, kind of like the same thing on the for-profit side, but the closer that alignment is, now all of a sudden your donors are saying, hey, I'm excited that you're helping these people, not just by giving them something, but by actually developing them in a great way. And our network is roughly a 60-40, 40-60 split, always has been. In earned income to donative. And so our donors get excited when it's out there in the hands. Our training process is out there in the hands of more people. But at the same time, and so our donors make it accessible financially to people. We'd have to charge a whole lot more. But at the same time, those people that go through our training, they're like, hey, I'm contributing to my own well-being, and I'm doing something as well. So yeah, lots of ways you can do it. Like you said, fee for service, widgets, whatever it may be, but it needs to align with your cause and your values.
Yeah, definitely. I think you bring up a good point too, of making sure that it aligns with your mission, not just from, the public, perception, but also the IRS, right? There is what we call unrelated business income, which means, yes, you did earn the money, but it is not really in line with your mission. So for example, if you have a food pantry and you decide to get into the home flipping business, and you generate a bunch of money from flipping the homes, that is something that may not necessarily align with your mission. Now, I also know other organizations that get into renovating properties because their mission is to actually house people with affordable housing. That is in line with their mission, and they may choose to rent the properties, or they might flip and sell the properties if the market is right. So definitely pay close attention to those things. And we see that occasionally, not just with, earned income or what we call it's earned, but unrelated business income. I've seen really weird things happen sometimes. I've seen billboards that want to be placed on nonprofits' property, and they get a check, every for like rental.
Cell phone towers
right?
is a big one with churches.
Cell phone towers, absolutely. Also, if you receive gifts, the ownership rights to like an oil field. It sounds really random, but I've actually seen that happen before, where a donor will basically gift you with this, and then you hold on to it and you get some sort of residual check every year. So, hey, that's a small price to pay, but just know that there's additional filing requirements, and you do have to pay taxes on those. So, okay, now that we have this opportunity of like earned income, whether you're a nonprofit or donative income, if you're a for-profit organizations, we talked a little bit about, it aligns with your values, it's in line with your mission. Can you talk a little bit more about how your values play into that? Like, what should people be considering? Maybe they haven't even gotten into questioning what their values are as a business owner. Where would you start with that, Bill?
Yeah. So, and your question is one of the reasons, we spend so much time in clarifying your calling. Mm-hmm. So clarifying your calling is a deep dive into what values you hold. And we want to get you to about 4 that you can articulate that are very transportable. Mm-hmm. They're going to come out of your experiences, your people that have influenced you, your failures, more out of your failures than your successes, usually out of your mm-hmm. joys, out of your hates. And those are really what we kind of call the boundaries that you have in your life. So I can always tell what your values are. If I tick you off, I did something that broke a value. All right. I said something, I crossed a line. So those lines are important because that helps you be true to yourself. And so when you say, as a nonprofit, and churches have a hard time with this, what do you mean we can earn revenue, right? Mm-hmm. And so for them to go, actually, this will help us do the mission more. Mm-hmm. But that earned revenue, it has to be within some certain lines there that I feel good about it when I go to sleep at night and I wake up and I don't feel like I'm selling my soul somehow. So that's where those values and understanding who you are, because especially as an entrepreneur, when you start something, it's going to have the values that you have. It's going to look like you, feel like you, mm-hmm. and we want alignment there for your sake, especially, but also for the mission.
Yeah. So speaking of, I guess, values, what values do you think donors are seeking, and how do you make sure there's a connection made there, aligning your values with what a donor, and not feeling like you're selling out, not feeling like, we have this phrase, chasing the dollars or,
right.
How do you align that?
Right. Well, you're chasing the dollar, money's not the mission, but where there's no money, there's no mission. So
I love that. I need to start using that.
You have to get that. And I would say just begin by asking, right? And this, the larger the gift, the more that person is going to see it as a ROI. They're seeing it as an investment, and they are very, very clear on what they want to see that gift do. Mm-hmm. And so, and when you can find values that of donors that align with your particular values or your particular mission. And so, for instance, our whole phrase is that we help you launch ventures that help people. Right. So we're assuming that most people we work with as the founders want to help people, but we're also assuming that our donors want to see people helped. And now sometimes I'm going to communicate differently to my donors than I'm going to communicate to my end clients. Mm-hmm. But the more that similar can be. So donors themselves, their biggest value they could give their money a zillion places. They want to see an impact with their dollars. They want to see that you're trustworthy, that you do what you say you're going to do with the dollars, mm-hmm. when you say you're going to do with the dollars, with the impact mm-hmm. you say is going to happen. So mm-hmm. those are those 3 things a donor's looking for. And the more they give you, the more they want to see that. As a buddy of mine says, you can't fix broken glass. So once you break the glass on a donor, restore that's very hard. You want to be sure you do what you say you're going to do and show them the impact. Tell them the impact, tell them the stories. So
yeah, I love that. Well, and you mentioned donor, but I mean, going back to whether you're for-profit or nonprofit, I think at the end of the day, the donor wants to see the impact. And if you've spelled out what you hope to do with it, make sure that it's visible, give credit where credit is due. And in many cases, we are doing those things. Maybe we're just not doing as great of a job as we could be or should be, and making sure that, those that help contribute to the cause see what impact we are making. So that's a good point. And I love that money is not the mission, but without money, there's generally no mission. So, and as an accountant, of course, I always like to say that, or some version of.
Well, and you, I'm sure you've seen in many nonprofits that because of their financial struggles, money becomes the mission all of a sudden, right? And that's where you lose sight of what you're trying to do.
And that's such a hard balance. I mean, you bring up, money becomes the mission. It's either like the pendulum has swung to that direction, or we, aren't focused enough on money, right? And we sacrifice the quality of our programs, the resources that our programs need, the people that our programs need, all of those sorts of things without, I just, right before we hopped on this call, I was having a conversation with a leader of a nonprofit, and it's a brand new organization, and she has some seed funding, and I don't know if I should do it slow and conservative, or I should just like jump right in and hire these people and all these sorts of things. And I just mentioned to her, you certainly don't want to chase the dollars, but you're well funded at this point, and the sooner that you get up and running, the sooner you can delegate these responsibilities, like you said, build the momentum. You then, as the leader, can start focusing your energy on fundraising even more money, right? And I explained to her what one of the observations I have. A for-profit entrepreneur, their number one focus is always, I don't want to say always, oftentimes it shifts to revenue generation typically, right? You're like, I know if I need to invest in something, right? It's usually not, it's not in my budget. It's like, how can I afford to pay for it? If there's going to be an impact on my bottom line, meaning if I'm going to make any sort of money off of this, then it makes no sense for me not to invest in. I just had to figure out how to pay for it, right? And in the nonprofit world, sometimes we focus less on revenue generation, and we just focus on we had set out so much expenses, and we just have to manage to that. It's more of a scarcity mindset than an abundance mindset. I think like a for-profit entrepreneur, I need to go out and find the money. Someone has it, I just got to find it, right? In the for-profit world, well, this is the pot that we, set ourselves up for. This is what we're managing to, and we just have to keep it within that space. And sometimes I think what would happen if we kind of transform that way of thinking, not necessarily just chase any dollar, but putting revenue generation forefront in our minds. So again, you don't want the pendulum to swing all the way to money is the only mission that matters, but then also prioritizing revenue generation higher so that you can therefore have better programming. That's always the dream. But I have found, though, that many leaders, and I would say like any business, many leaders of nonprofit organizations certainly don't come from a business background. They don't come from a place of, raising dollars. And the funny story is, this, Bill, you're an owner and founder of a for-profit business. I am as well. I never saw myself as a salesperson. I never thought I would be responsible for revenue generation. I'm just an accountant trying to crunch numbers. But one of the interesting things when you become the owner or the leader of any business, what somebody told me one time, a really influential woman that created what was then became a publicly traded company, when she met me the first time, she's like, "Oh, now you're a salesperson. You're an accountant, but you're an owner now. So now you're a salesperson." And I really took that to heart, that when you become that leader, that now becomes your role. And that's very uncomfortable. It wasn't comfortable for me, and I'm sure very uncomfortable for most people. So anyway, moving on to now creating revenue. What are some of the key questions you should ask yourself to ensure that, these revenue streams are great fits for your organization? It's like, okay, I heard the preaching, we should be focusing more on revenue generation. Maybe we have these ideas, but what are some of those key questions that you should be asking for to make sure it's a great fit? Because just because it's possible to raise money doesn't mean it's a great fit.
Well, no, that's true. And I would say you just have to kind of start back at the foundation of what's the cause, what's your cause that you have, and anytime you have a cause, you're looking for outcomes. So rather than your lead indicators, what are those trailing? What are the outcomes you're trying to see happen? And if you're a nonprofit, especially, which we're a nonprofit, and so we're looking to develop all new ventures. We want to see those new ventures, and we want to see them be financially sustainable. We want to see them introduce faith into that community. So we want to see that, and that's what we measure. Now, because that's the outcome we want, then we go back and go, okay, what's the best strategy to get that outcome? Well, one of them is we've got to equip those people, and we want to clarify calling, equip calling, activate calling. But we also know that in our society, if I give it away for free, there's something about I had to pay for it. It increases the value in it. And it's actually going to mean I'm going to use it, more likely to use it. So that's where we had to really wrestle with, what's our cause? Is this strategy, how can we have a strategy of the earned income that aligns with that cause and doesn't take it away? So if I say, I'm now going to charge people who are starting, for instance, a smaller nonprofit in the Bronx to help care for single Puerto Rican moms. That's a real one. Wow, they don't have a lot of money. That's true. We can get them a reduced rate, but they actually feel good about, I'm helping do this myself. I'm taking responsibility. So it's really, what is your cause? And this strategy of earned income or fee for service, and some of the famous ones you'll see, especially if they're supporting women in cultures that are underserved and undervalued. Well, you can sell their products, right? So you're helping them create products that you then sell that go back into the nonprofit, that kind of thing. So it's really, and I would say you sit down with your staff or some other person and say, okay, let's come up with a whole list of things we can do. Which ones really are tight that it's like when I tell that story, the donor goes, oh, well, of course, that makes perfect sense. And by the way, I'll buy that purse as well as give you $100, so.
So much useful information in this conversation. And I always have to ask this question, Bill, when I start talking to people that have created businesses, created organizations or missions that help serve the nonprofit community or the for-profit, anybody trying to do something good in the world. I always question, what is their backstory? How did they end up in this space? So Bill, tell me a little bit more about how you decided to start FiveTwo, and a little bit more about it. And more importantly, for anybody listening, if they're interested in hearing more about what you have to say and how to create earned income or donative income, so all of those things, let's start with FiveTwo. What made you start that? How did you get into the space?
Sure, Tosha. I've been a pastor since '87. I was always the guy who was charged with starting new ministries and growing congregations and things like that. And very fortunate to always be in that seat and learn quickly that new people are attracted to new things, especially in organizations. And so if you want to reach new people, you've got to start new. We have a phrase, start new to reach new. So I started a fast-growing church in West Houston in '97, scaled to 3 locations, 1,600 families from 7 families, preschool of 400 kids, sports league, all this kind of stuff. So was part of all that. And in 2009, we wanted to help church planters because it was a very difficult job. And we launched FiveTwo. Our name comes from the feeding of the 5,000, 5 loaves and 2 fish in that miracle, abundance to scarcity, as you mentioned already. Yeah. But then in around 12, we realized that church planters are a pretty small group of people. And yes, we want to, and we still pour into church planters, but we said, what if we just poured into entrepreneurial Christians who probably don't realize that all of life is sacred, and how can we help them transfer their business knowledge or transfer their faith knowledge into their business knowledge. And in 15, I left full-time pastoral ministry to lead this network, and we were off to the races. So we have a training process that we lovingly call Mother Teresa meets a friendly Mark Cuban. And we combine this theology of presence with lean business startup principles, business model canvas, customer pains, gains, jobs theory, that kind of thing. And it's been a wonderful, wonderful ride. So yeah, I get to do what I love doing and living through people. So you can reach me. You can go to FiveTwo.com, FiveTwo.com. Our new site, by the time this goes live, our new site will all be launched there. And there's resources, blogs there. You can reach out for just a quick coaching call if you're trying to figure out some things from one of our staff. You can also go to startnewtraining.com. That's all one word. Okay. That's where our training platform sits. And we'd love to help you and love to help you be successful in creating ventures that help people.
Startnewtraining.com, you said, right?
Startnewtraining.com. And actually, there's a free mini course if you're just interested in kind of tasting some stuff. Startnewtraining.com/mini-course, mini course. You can go there, and we have some stuff on how to gain immediate traction. And it's about a four or so brief video.
Okay. Well, Bill, that sounds like a lot of really helpful resources to get started. We will go ahead and put all of those links in the show notes for everybody to refer back to. Bill, thank you again so much for the conversation. This has been a fantastic conversation, and I always love talking about creative ways for nonprofits to run things differently, or kind of look at things outside of the box or be creative in that sense. So this has certainly helped us with that. Bill, thanks again so much for joining us. And until next time, thank you all.